So please welcome, enthusiastically and warmly, Viv Groskop.
Hey, thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Oh, in the spirit of Google Translate, I feel like I should say «Как дела? Спасибо» and «Я люблю тебя».
Well, that's very rude.
Are there
of
any
you.
Russian speakers in the room? Yeah. So.
What did you say there?
Hello, thank you, I love you.
Oh,
How are you?
I can see this is going to be a great chat with you.
Yeah.
Let's just start with what do you mean owning the room? What does that mean?
Well, you just demonstrated it actually with that little slip up that you had, not being able to say Anna Karenina. Can you say it now?
No.
Okay. Owning the room is about feeling really comfortable in the spotlight, so comfortable that you're okay with failing. That's it, basically. Because in everyday life, when we're talking to people, when we're just moving through our lives, we don't go around thinking, oh, I'm going to meet my friend for coffee, but I haven't prepared anything to say. You know, we move through life very comfortably and we don't question ourselves. But suddenly, when we're in a position like, not literally like this, but sometimes literally like this, where we're in a spotlight, but that spotlight can feel like it comes anytime, like in an interview situation, job interview, in a difficult conversation with your boss, in a confrontation, we can feel like we're in that spotlight. And that is the moment when the adrenaline comes and we have that fight or flight, which is a very natural human reaction. It's about learning how to be comfortable with that, control it, and feel like you're just owning yourself in the way that you do in normal moments. I've gone quite Paul McKenna quite early on. That's okay.
So we're going to go into, I think, sort of get practical about what you learn and what you've shared in the book. But before we do that, I mentioned this idea of doing 100 stand-up gigs in 100 days, which you did when you had a child under one, I think.
Yes.
As if it wasn't stressful enough. Just tell us a bit about, like, why did you do that?
Well, some people will do anything to avoid bedtime for small children, and I was one of those people. No, what happened to me was that, as you said, I had a long and very happy career as a freelance journalist. I started my career in my early 20s working in old school Fleet Street, which lots of the beautiful young people in the room won't even remember. So I had an office job until I was about 25, working for places like the Daily Express and the Daily Telegraph and places I hated. And it was a good experience for me to be in a job I hated. It made me go freelance. And then I had about 10 years of loving writing and freelancing, and that was how I was able to have my 3 children. I have 3 children, which is an answer to the question, how many children is too many? And as I got into my mid-30s, and I felt like I had a lot of control over my life because I had a lot of flexibility and I loved my work, I began to realize that as my children were growing up, I was telling them a lie. So I was always saying to them, do what you want with your life, live your dreams, don't let other people tell you what to do. And the more I said this to them, the more I realized it wasn't true for me. And that the thing I'd always wanted to do, which was to perform, to entertain, to be in the spotlight, to really try stand-up comedy was what I really wanted to do. I'd never done it because I was too damn chicken. I was chicken.
How did you know that's what you wanted to do?
I had an idea from when I was a child. People again, too young to remember, the kids from Fame. Yeah, 1980s. Doris Schwartz and Bruno Martelli in The Kids from Fame, Mr. Swarovski.
Yes,
you were there.
I was there.
Still
got the leg warmers, yeah.
Doris Schwartz was this character in the sort of mid-80s, a woman stand-up in the New York High School of the Performing Arts. And New Yorkers in the room cringing. And I loved her when I was a child, but I grew up in the kind of environment where my parents later turned out to be massive Brexit voters. And like quite a sort of closed, don't take any risks, do not do anything creative sort of environment. So I didn't feel I was able to set that as a goal. Like, I'd love to do stand-up, I'd love to do acting. If I could live my life over again, I would have done that from a much younger age. But instead I kind of was like, okay, well, maybe I can be a writer. And just through seeing my own kids grow up and realising that, life is too short to stifle the stuff you really want to do, I had to acknowledge, actually, I'm kind of hiding behind this keyboard. I'm hiding behind the words, and I've got to get out there and at least try. And so I ended up doing some workshops and all that kind of stuff that you do when you first try it, and realising that I loved it. After the first workshop I ever did in stand-up comedy, when I was 35, I'm 45 now, I know it's amazing. And I came home and my husband said to me, after doing 3 hours of this stand-up training, this is the most relaxed I've seen you in 10 years. Oh. And I knew I really wanted to do it. But then you learn very quickly how hard it is to actually do it, and that if you are going to do it seriously, you better get to 100 gigs fast. Right. And I just had my third child, and he'd turned 1. When he turned 1, I was like, okay, you've had enough attention from me now. I'm going out every night, 100 gigs and 100 nights. And that was in 2011. And since then, I've gone on to do 5 shows at Edinburgh, one-woman shows, and ended up hosting book tours for Graham Norton, Dawn French, Jennifer Saunders, Joe Brand, and moving into more radio and TV work, which is what I really wanted to do.
So it was a route to something else in the end?
Yeah, it was. And if you'd have said to me 10 years ago, oh, you're going to be doing stand-up and you're going to go on stage with Graham Norton or any of these people, and then you're going to write a book for people about how to own the room, I would be like, no thanks. No, I don't really want, that sounds horrible. But as time went on, I realised how much I'd learned about all of this, and that I really wanted to pass it on to other people and have this discussion about, it's not an entirely gendered discussion, and that's a really important point to make, but I do think it's harder sometimes for women to try these things, and that's obviously a huge conversation in comedy, is why aren't there as many women? I think loads more women are coming through now, and the last 10 years has seen a massive change, but the numbers are always really skewed, and on a comedy bill, you're often the only woman out of 6, and you're generally going to be the opener, like the lowest status spot, all that stuff. So having learned how to do this on the fly late in life, I wanted to pass it on. And then I found I was constantly thinking for the idea for this book and for the podcast where I interview lots of women about all of this stuff. I was thinking, I can't write that because who will listen to me? I can't. I'm not famous. No one knew. I'm not a massively successful stand-up comedian. And I remember saying to this friend of mine who's a writer, I can't write this book. This book should be written by Joan Rivers. Like who would want to read How to Own the Room by Joan Rivers? I mean, that would be the most amazing book ever. And my friend just looked at me and said, Viv, Joan Rivers is dead. And if she were alive, she would not be bothered to write this book. She is not a book writing kind of person, although she did write a lot of books, but she would not want to write this book. So this is your book. This is your idea. Put it out there and see if people are interested. And the book came out in November. I met you shortly after it came out, and it's become a bestseller. It's sold in 3 countries. It's coming out in Canada next week. The podcast has gone top 10 on iTunes, which the podcast got put together in 2 weeks, literally because Mary Portas, the retail guru, came to me and said, how can I help you with your book? And I said, well, it's coming out in 2 weeks, so I can't interview you for it or anything. How about I interview you for the podcast, which doesn't actually exist, but it will if you say yes to an interview. And she said yes. And so then suddenly I had a podcast, which happened in 2 weeks. So
you are a woman on a mission, though, aren't you, really?
Yeah, because this stuff is really important. And I've been really... I've had a lot of moments of being really upset, actually, of the stories that have come out from doing these kind of events. I do one-on-one work with people. I do workshops where people can come and have a clinic with me for 10 minutes, and I do little interventions about presentation and confidence. And men as well as women, but often from women, like the depth of people's insecurity and the weight that they're carrying with them about my voice sounds weird, no one wants to listen to my voice, I've got an annoying voice, I feel like I'm talking about myself here, all of these tiny little niggling gremlins are so prevalent in everybody.
Yeah.
And there's got to be a way to talk about this and get rid of it, because everybody thinks it's personal to them and they have this specific problem that they would need some help with. And it's not. Everybody has it.
Absolutely. So I want to get into the book. So one of the things I love about the book is it's written in chapters around people. And so Be More Michelle Obama is the first chapter. So,
yes.
And
demonstrate it now, Matt.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
You actually are. You actually are.
So I said to Viv, actually, that chapter is about something called happy high status, and we'll ask you about that in a second. But yesterday, I had those three words in my mind when I went on stage at a big technology, media and telecoms event, and I was speaking between the CEO of Sky, owned by Rupert Murdoch, and the CEO of News Corp, owned by Rupert Murdoch. And I was thinking, I know what these guys are going to say about the technology companies, and I'm going to be more Michelle Obama in between. And so thank you. Now...
Did you have a sleeveless... I love that. Did you wear a sleeveless No.
I haven't quite got
next
there.
Time.
But,
next
so,
time.
But happy high status.
Yeah.
That is a great concept. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so when I first started training in stand-up and taking all of these workshops and trying to work out how I was going to start doing this stuff, I came across this idea in improv comedy called happy high status. And it's about the moment where you are so open and comfortable in a space that you can accept disagreement, you can accept dissent, you can accept that the person coming after you is going to trash you. You can take on haters and be like, yeah, tell me more about why you hate me, and be very open and collegiate with it and allow everybody's viewpoints to exist at any one time. I am personally not very good at this because I'm quite neurotic, but it's an energy that you need to have, for example, if you're emceeing in comedy, where you might have to switch the energy from one comedian to the next, you might have to bring up the energy in the room or calm it down if somebody was really crazy. And it's about being able to feel your way into situations where you make sure everybody feels unthreatened and everybody feels welcome. And Michelle Obama is the expert of this. But the other example, to show it's not gendered as well, the other example is George Clooney.
Tell us the story.
So the story they use in improv about George Clooney, it's supposed to be a made-up story, but I like to think it's true and that it's going to happen to me one day. So you imagine that you are going to a Hollywood party. It's the Oscars and you're going to the Vanity Fair party, which recently discredited by the New York Times, but imagine it's still in its heyday. And you're going to this fabulous party, everybody's in black tie, you're late, you're meeting your friends who you really want to see. On the way in, you tap a waiter on the shoulder to ask for a drink because you're late and you're in a hurry. Oh, can you just get me a drink? You go and join your friends, the waiter comes over with the drink, you turn around, it's George Clooney. And you mistook George Clooney for a waiter, which in a black tie situation could happen, right? Matt, you move in these circles.
I've done it twice.
Right.
Don't do it twice, that's all I'd say.
And the happy high status lesson is that George Clooney hands you a cocktail or your glass of champagne or whatever without making you remotely feel small. Because he's George Clooney and he can. And Michelle Obama could do that. Barack Obama could do that. They're not going to turn around and say, excuse me, I'm not a cocktail waiter. But to show you that happy high status is not the same as high status, the person you could not do that with is Donald Trump. So it's not about conferred status or a business card. It's not about the actual position that you occupy in the hierarchy. It's about how you conduct yourself with other people.
I think it's a great concept. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned Joan Rivers. She's in your book as well, Be More Joan Rivers.
Yeah.
What do we do when we want to be more Joan?
Oh my God. Well, I was tricky including Joan Rivers in this actually, particularly because she's an example of somebody I think whose comedy would not exist anymore nowadays because woke she ain't. So I wanted to include her as an example of a person who is everything we're told, men and women, we shouldn't be. So we shouldn't talk too fast. We must make sure that we speak in a measured way. We must. Lots of women are always saying, "Should I lower my tone so that people can hear?" No, just speak like a normal person. And Joan Rivers breaks a lot of these rules. Okay, she can because she's a stand-up comedian, but she's a person who speaks way too fast, who has way too much energy. You can barely sort of keep up with what she's saying, supposedly, and yet you never miss a single word. So I wanted to include lots of examples in the book of women who break the rules, because there's a lot of these kind of fake bullshit rules around speaking and presenting and how we come across to people that we all know in reality. We all have, even within our day-to-day lives in work, like managers who, they're not a stereotypical manager. They are actually maybe a bit more introverted than you would expect. Or there's somebody who's a bit more relaxed in a corporate culture than you. There are always people who break the rules. And for me, it's really important to try and find your own energy and your own style by looking at those people and saying, oh, that's not orthodox. How are they getting away with that? That's really interesting to me.
So we're working on trying to get a workshop lined up so people can experience this in practice, which would be great. So look out for dates on that. But what do you most often find when you're working with people? Is there something that's a really common issue that you have to encourage people to deal with, or is everybody got their own different challenges?
There's one very specific thing I want to mention because I've noticed you doing it, Matt. It's really interesting. I know we had lunch in your lovely canteen before we came on stage, and you were talking. He's really no, you're not, because you're happy high status, so you're not worried about what I'm going to say or do. So you're okay. You're okay.
Okay.
So we were talking in a group of about 10 of us in an informal conversational situation, and you and lots of other people in the group, and probably me as well, when we're talking, we tend to talk like this and say what's been going on in our week, and everything that we say goes up at the end of every sentence. And I was really interested because I noticed you were doing it as well. And I often say, oh, this is something that's very common to women and younger women. And I was very interested to notice that you followed that inflection as well, which is totally useful and appropriate in a conversational setting. However, lots of people then transfer that into a formal interview presentation situation, and it makes everything you say sound like a suggestion, and it weakens your power. And it's the one thing that everybody needs to work on. Because if I start talking to you like this, you don't know if I really mean what I'm saying. And last weekend I went to Paris, and my husband's name's Simon. Did I even know my husband's name? I mean, So it's really interesting to me that you were talking like that, because this kind of talking is actually necessary for forging bonds and for showing, this isn't a formal situation. We're having a normal chat. This is day to day. But the moments where you are in the spotlight and you want to step up and be heard, move out of that, hey, we're just hanging out in the canteen and having some laksa. You move. It's quite a nice laksa.
It was a fun lunch.
It was a fun lunch. So
We shouldn't have had that second vodka, though.
No. It's recognising the difference between conversational speech and more formal.
Okay, thank you for that. You made me feel uneasy there, but thank you.
That was intentional.
Now, can I ask you another question?
You see there, it is a question.
I'm really confused. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come to you for questions in a moment. So please come to the mic in a second.
But can I say something funny as well, so that I'm embarrassed?
Okay.
Right. So Matt and I, we don't really know each other.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. But we are neighbours. We live 2 minutes walk apart, and our children have been at the same school then at different times. And I have known for a while, there's this guy, I live in Teddington, there's this guy who lives locally who works for Google, Matt from Google, and he's a parent, right?
Where are you going with this, Viv?
Right? And so then I met Matt
Yes.
at a friend's party, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's the guy, Matt from Google, who lives here. And we talked about this.
We did.
And you said, oh, I'm really interested in this. This is so important for people to talk about this. Can you come round and chat about it? And so I go round he invites me round to his house to go and chat about it. I'm thinking, oh yeah, Matt from Google is a parent at the school. And on the way, I thought, I'm just going to check who he is. And I was Googling. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So.
What was it that came up that...
Well, I was like, oh, I see.
Google's not very kind to me, actually, if you search.
Yeah, well, no, I don't mean that something came up. I just mean I then realised who you were.
Okay.
Because I was thinking I was just going to meet this guy called Matt, who's from Google. Yeah.
So can I ask you another question?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so thank you very much for that story.
You didn't like it.
So something else you mentioned in the book, and I think people will have maybe heard of before, is like how your physical posture can help you or hinder you in these settings as well. And you have a chapter, Be More Amy Cuddy. She's a body language expert. And as I was going through the book, actually, I was watching each of these people on YouTube and what you meant. It's really interesting to read the book and see the stuff. So what does she teach us? And tell us about
Amy Cuddy is probably somebody lots of people in the room will know. She has one of the most watched TED Talks ever about power poses. Shall we embrace this, Matt?
Okay.
Okay. Oh, you see? Right, so if people haven't watched this TED Talk, it's from about 5 years ago. It's now on about 50 million views. And Amy Cuddy, she has a book called Presence, which is all about body language. But it's more about how your body language affects how you feel inside, rather than how it affects how you come across to other people. So power poses are Wonder Woman, Usain Bolt, very nice, and the one I call City Wanker, this. Yeah. And the whole point of the power poses is opening up your body. And her TED Talk explains that if you hold these poses in a private place, like not in your meeting, hello, you go to a private place and you hold this pose for at least 2 minutes, it changes the chemicals in your brain. That's what her research showed. It's very interesting because that was 5 years ago, and then that went viral and led to a book and everything. And since then, of course, because she's popular neuroscience, all the other neuroscientists said, actually, no, there is not enough evidence to show the chemicals in the brain, and your sample size is very small, and that it's been a bit of a sad kind of thing. But for me, these power poses really work. I don't care if the real science is there or not. I've done it, it works. And it makes a lot of sense to me of this opening up of the body, not for public consumption. So it's not about how you come across to other people, but for fooling yourself into, oh, I've got this. And that feeling of Usain Bolt crossing the finishing line is the feeling of I've got this. And it's very hard if you've been and stood in a dressing room, in a toilet, in like standing over there, I was like this. It totally calms you and takes away any feelings of smallness and nerves that you might have.
And something else you touched on in the book is that people take their cue from you in terms of if you're on stage and you're nervous and there are tensions on yourself.
You see the difference in how someone comes across when they do this. Yeah, it's so important. So if you go into a situation with this bigger energy, I think we're frightened of this because we don't want to come across as an arsehole. Can I say, like I've said it now? We don't want to come across as that person, you know? Nobody wants to be that person who you know, nobody really wants to be like, hey, I own the room. You know, nobody wants to be that person. So we're scared of that openness and that. But in fact, most people, they just need a bit more of that and a bit less of this. And don't be afraid to like overdo it. You can always rein it back in, but we're so afraid that we go too far the other way and we don't lead. And then other people, they do take their cue from you in all things. You know, how you enter a stage, how you enter a room, that they will meet you with the same energy.
Do please come to the microphone, because, there we go, fantastic. I'm terrified I'm just going to get an interrogation or more. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the talk. I have a question around how you started in terms of failure. Like, actually, you mentioned that owning the room is being comfortable with failing. And I guess my question is, especially because you do stand-up comedy, have you ever failed when you've actually owned the room? And what was it like to kind of pick yourself up from that point and actually take control of the room again? And if it was even in the same situation, or if it was when you came back to it.
I almost didn't listen to I did listen to the question, but I almost didn't listen to the question because you have a great tone and great presence and no uptalk unless it's a question. Very lovely. But the question is, we all have so much to learn. The question is, what constitutes failure and how have I recovered from that? In stand-up, you learn nothing unless you fail. And it's like any I'm not saying stand-up is an artistic endeavour. I think it's a bit pretentious to say that. But in any creative endeavour or something where you're giving people something that they didn't actually ask for, that's always the really interesting thing, is that you're trying to say, you didn't ask for this, or you're not expecting this, but look, you're going to like it. That is always a huge risk and constitutes huge failure. So many times I would fail very badly. I remember the first time I ever did a Saturday night gig, and that's a big deal. And when I was trying to do my 100 gigs in 100 nights, I could never get Saturday nights booked, because that's the night when people pay a lot of money to see professionals, and I was not a professional then. And I'd be missing a night, and because I was doing 100 gigs, 100 consecutive nights, that would mean I'd have to do 2 the next night, or if I missed 3 Saturdays, then I'd have to do 3 on one other night. And so I was desperate to get this Saturday night gig, and I got it, and I was opening, and I did material that I'd done maybe 20 or 30 gigs before, a 5-minute slot, that had gone really well, and I knew was good. It was solid, it was gold, solid gold. And it absolutely bombed. In a room of about 200 people, that's a lot of silence. And it was a full-on tumbleweed for the whole of the time. And I had no skills and no experience of knowing how to turn that around. And my head split into 3 parts. The first part is the front of my head. Keep talking, just keep going, keep going. Middle part, think of something else to say. Find something, no, and there isn't anything. Think of. And the back part of my head, the third part was like, why don't you decide what method of suicide you're going to use when this is over? Because you will not want to live in society any longer because you have shamed yourself. And it was really, really horrific. And it was a painful death because lots of the other deaths I'd had, like mini deaths, open mic, or whereas a workshop vibe, that's much easier. The audience knows you're new. But this was like my first professional thing, and I fluffed it. And I went to the back of the room after I'd finished and, walked off stage to like walk of shame. And I said to this comedian at the back of the room, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? Is it what I'm wearing? Is it my hair? Is my voice? Well, I couldn't understand why it worked once, but not that time. And he looked at me and I thought, oh, wow, he's going to say something so profound now and it's going to change everything. And he said, just be funny. Right. And I did walk home in tears, and I was still crying the next morning. But after a while, I learned, especially because then I was doing my 100 gigs, and that was the trick of the 100 gigs. That was like number 27, well, tomorrow's number 28. Yeah. Let it go. So I had to go back and do another one, and then the next night it was fine. And the thing is, he was right. Just be funny. Like, just fail, learn from it, try again, and just be. But, that's a stupid thing to say. It's like saying just relax. But the reality is just force yourself through difficult situations, accept it as a learning curve. And I wish I hadn't put myself through so much personal torture, because what I was experiencing was not really personal to me. It was the process. Process is failure and learning from failure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow.
My question was just around humour and how important you feel that is. I guess it's one of those things you imagine you either innately have it or you don't. So would you suggest that people should learn to be humorous or use humour, or is that the only tool? What would you say?
Oh, what a lovely question. Well, there are two parts to this question. Number one is, do you have to be born funny? And I think some people are naturally funny and they can channel that in different ways. Being naturally funny in life doesn't necessarily translate to being funny as a performer. And there are lots of performers who are really awkward in life, and lots of people, there really are. And there are lots of people who are very funny in life, who you put them in a stand-up situation and you're actually working from a script. And that's a whole different discipline. So knowing what's funny on stage is not the same as knowing what's funny in life. But I don't think that you're necessarily born with it or not born with it. I think you can allow yourself to play, because a lot of it is about accessing your childhood self. Because when we're kids, we're all pretty funny, right? All kids are funny. Kids are funny. Have kids. Yeah, let that be the message to you
Fewer
today.
than three.
Yes.
Yeah, two.
Yeah, two, yeah. Happy International Women's Day. Have children. No, use contraception. That's the message. Yeah, but kids, sorry, Matt.
What was the question?
But yeah, kids are funny, and when we're kids, we play and we make each other laugh, and we're silly and we don't care. And then round about the age of, like, parents will recognise this age of 7, 8, 9, what they call the social editor starts to kick in. And the social editor is the person who makes you think inside, oh no, what if other people think I said the wrong thing? And oh, in this situation, I'm not allowed to do that. And these are really important to have that social editor. Otherwise, we would all be, leaking out stuff the whole time and acting out, which is what kids do. But it's really sad, because the flip side of that is that we lose the play that we have. So anytime that you feel like you want to get more humour into something, just try and access your kid self. Yeah.
Great answer. Do come for other questions. Oh, here we go. Thank you.
So let's say you work with a range of clients who are high status to happy high status.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
Really.
And you are not yet either status, but more of an aspiring happy high status. How do you own the room as that person with high status?
Very interesting. Specifically working with, some people who are difficult and some people who are fine.
Yeah.
You're saying, yeah.
Like Anna Wintour, for example.
Oh, what would you do if Anna Wintour was your boss? Right. What a great example. So, Anna Wintour is somebody who is not happy high status.
Right.
She is guarded.
Unhappy high status, would you say?
Well, I imagine in herself she's very happy. She's got things set up just how she wants, but she's kind of guarded high status. Like, the Queen is not happy high status. She can't be. She can't have the same energy as Michelle Obama. So, for example, Michelle Obama, when she met the Queen, she touched her, which was a breach of protocol. But she's so happy high status, she got away with it. The Queen would not touch anybody because she's not in that kind of happy zone, and neither would Anna Wintour. She's in that kind of guarded zone. For me, it's really important to underline that point of, it's not about the status that you actually occupy. It's about your energy and your generosity and your willingness to accept any opinion and work with whoever you're working with. And it's not a magic wand. So sometimes you work with difficult people, and the reality is they are difficult. And it doesn't matter how happy high status you are. Happy high status might help you be more zen about accepting, this person is quite tricky, but that's about them. It's not about me. I'm going to maintain my my poise.
Just as you're talking, I think there's something about getting your attention off yourself and not taking it personally if
not
somebody's
taking
radiating
it
like that.
personally.
And I think what you say about high status, happy high status, seems to me is about putting people at ease and having that sort of grace to be able to do that. There's something in that about getting your attention off yourself, which is hard to do when there's somebody that makes you feel sort of defensive or small or nervous.
Yeah, exactly.
Weird things,
and that is something that is very hard won in comedy, because there can often be negative energy somewhere in the room, like people are often too drunk, or there could even be violence in the room, or they could be just somebody in the bit of the room who doesn't really like you and is here for someone else. And you have to learn to that's fine. No, everybody has to be here to like me. You're a bit drunk, great, let's look after you, make sure you're okay. You want to heckle, okay, let's let you have your moment. It's having that kind of lightness of everything is fine.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
One thing you talk about in the book is, there are often occasions when you're asked to be on a stage or a platform when you're part of a panel. And, how should you behave when you're not the person talking? And just before we came on, we talked about that and said, well, if you want to know how not to do it, look at Alan Partridge. And I've been struggling ever since then with the sort of thing. But
that's a very good impression.
been working on it for a while. So just tell us a bit more about that. There are a whole bunch of other things to do with being on stage where the attention is on you or not on you. How do you deal with that sort of mixture of things? You do lots of hosting panels, for example, and that kind of experience.
Yeah, I had to learn this over a long period of time, because I was before I was really confident doing a lot of stuff on my own, I started, and this is a good lesson for anybody who wants to do more speaking, volunteer for the kind of, I was going to say vice president role, but that's a bit grand, but volunteer to be the moderator, volunteer to be the person like Hannah did, being the person introducing, volunteer to be part of it, but not the keynote. And so then you have to learn sometimes how to be on stage when the attention isn't on you. And as you say, there's a tendency sometimes if you're on a panel or you're an interviewer and somebody's giving a very long answer, to be like, to almost sort of overly show how self-conscious you are. Yeah. So you have to learn how to have an active listening role. And it's annoying, I don't have a pen with me, but do you have a pen? Great. So what I would often do is have pointless pen. Pointless pen is very useful for that role, also in meetings. So it's going to avoid you doing this or... we've all done that, right? So if you have pointless pen, you're disciplined to hold it and be still and just be actively listening. And that's useful, I think, in meetings as well as in a public situation where actually at an awards thing, I have to do awards things where there could be 27 awards and there's loads of stuff going on the stage and people having their photos taken, and I have to stand there and not be like, oh, I can't check my phone or look bored. And this could go on over 3 hours. I have to be engaged, so pointless pen.
Props.
My secret weapon.
Props are always good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But the other thing I wanted to say in relation to that is sometimes it doesn't matter that you don't have anything to say. And that's really important on a panel, as a moderator, in meetings. It doesn't always have to be your turn to talk. Sometimes it can be your turn to listen, to facilitate others.
Yes, I think the audience is always grateful when I just pass on to the next person. It's always good. But actually, it's true, isn't it? When you're in the audience, you don't necessarily want everyone on the panel to say, yes, let me just build on that.
Exactly.
Really annoying.
Exactly. And on panels, what I love is where the panellists talk to each other and the moderator says, in advance, please don't, use me as your safety net and as your I'd like to speak next, but speak across each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tessa.
Hi. My question's actually connected to what you're discussing now. I think often at Google we have to go out in groups or pairs. We might go to client events or various situations where you can't all own the room. And sometimes it's obvious who that leader is and you might know, it's my turn to be low presence. I guess my question is around how do you recommend dealing with that, either having that conversation beforehand or even if you're in a low presence role, how do you still own that moment without taking the limelight from either one of your colleagues or a client?
Yeah, for me, that's a happy high status question. And of course, you need to have a clear conversation, I think, as you would at any performance event, or, you know, who's going on first, how are we going on together, who's going to be introducing her. Like, setting the parameters and the expectations and the signposting is not only good for you, but good for whoever you're going to see. Of like, oh yeah, this is the person who's taking the lead. And you don't have to say those things when you get into a meeting, but you'll just show it in your body language. So being open and upfront and agreeing those things. But also, the thing I learned is it's not about you. Mm-hmm. It's not about you, and it doesn't have to be about you. And I had to learn that when I was sometimes when I was early on doing things like Graham Norton book tour or Dawn French book tour and stuff, I would be really, really nervous going on and thinking, people need to know about me. This is a big audience. They should know about me. And they should know that I'm a comedian. And oh my God, what if some of them think I'm not funny? And I had to remind myself, Viv, this is not about you. You're just there to be a safety net for that person, to be the fall guy if they need you. Mm. You've got to find your other space, your own space to shine in. So knowing when it's your moment and living up to it, and knowing when it isn't, is really important.
Real, thank you.
I actually, can I just add to that? Because I think one thing I think really helps is preparation. So whether it's in a meeting or whatever, kind of once you're really well prepared, then you can pay attention to what's going on in the room. And or something like this, I actually prepare a lot for this kind of thing. So I've read your book, I've listened to your podcasts, I know what I'm interested in, and then I can not worry about like what's the next question, because I can just listen, and that sounds really interesting. I think the same I find applies in those meetings. You know the stuff, and therefore you can relax and pay attention to what's happening in front of you. And sometimes we're so caught up in our own heads that we can't do that. I get that a lot. I've just realised I've now taken the limelight when it should be yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us, Viv. I've enjoyed this so much. I promise I'll try the power poses. But my question was, do you think that the rules for owning the room differ for women and for men?
Yes, well, it is the elephant in the room, this question, isn't it? Is it different for women and for men? So the book is called How to Own the Room, Women and the Art of Brilliant Speaking. And there doesn't need to be a book called How to Own the Room, Men and the Art of Brilliant Speaking. It would not get published. The reason I wanted to write it, and I wrote it in the way that I did, which is by a woman, for women, about women, was that all of the other material on this subject was by men, for men, about men. So you go back a few 10, 20 years, and the only examples are Martin Luther King, Winston Churchill. They're all very classic, and they're all very masculine examples. And I wanted to do something that reflects the last 20 years when we've had this huge turnaround, largely due to digital media. You know, without digital media, who would have ever seen Michelle Obama speaking at the Democrat conventions? Even television hasn't had as big an impact as YouTube, TED Talks, Facebook Live, all of these things that give us immediate access to women speaking. In terms of whether audiences respond differently to men and women, I think there's still something going on there, but we don't really know what it is. And it's something that is deep within our culture. Because I'm not sure it's so bad now, but when I started out as a stand-up, I feel the energy change in the room of, it's a woman. That's a shame. And that's the truth. Because even women, and women will often, all women stand-ups complain about this. Women come up to you at the end and say, I didn't expect you to be funny. I don't like women comedians. Women saying this. So there's a lot of cultural baggage in this stuff that's difficult for us to talk about and difficult to know why we feel this way. And for me, it's more important just to let go of all that and just let it be and just do whatever you want to do to try and break through it.
Thank you.
I would recommend the book, though, for men, because pretty much everything in there is also really, really helpful for anyone doing public speaking, I'd say.
Yeah, and lots of men who've read it and are into the podcast, which only features women, although I'm thinking of having like a token male series. Maybe not. They will say that this is really not about gender, it's about trying to do something to counter the phenomenon of the alphas. So the alpha person who always, and it doesn't have to be like the most high status person. It could be a low status person who's just really noisy and takes up all the energy in the room. And men feel that as much as women. And it's wanting to find a way to find your voice so that you get heard. And it's not just the most charismatic, the most dynamic. Do you know what I mean? And there's loads of other prejudices around this area as well, like class, accent, how good looking you are. Like the more good looking you are, the more people are going to listen to you. That's a prejudice that's deep within us as well. So it's trying to break through all of these things and finding a way to be okay with yourself.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. This was really hilarious and amazing to hear you speak. I was wondering, my question is kind of similar to the whole female-male dynamic, but more seniority level. So something, for example, that I noticed in my team is my boss's boss, who's a director, is very funny, right? And he'll open up a meeting and always kind of do something funny to kind of lighten the load and to make it a little bit, to make it easygoing. However, when you're more junior, right, it's actually tricky to do that. Sometimes you can do that and fall flat on your face. So kind of knowing where your place is in a meeting, or kind of what you talked about earlier, I was wondering if there's any kind of guidance you have around, how much power you have, right? Like, it's easy for Matt to be hilarious. He's like the person in EMEA, right? But if you're...
Laugh or you're fired.
But you can be. You could
Get
just
off.
be like,
He's the
voila.
person in what?
But you know what I mean. So how do you?
the region.
And do you have any experience with that? Have you seen people that are more junior kind of pull it off, and to what degree? And I don't know. Just what are your thoughts around this? I know it's a little bit of a,
No, it's a really great question, and it's one that comes up quite a lot. I do some work with senior women in much more formal organisations than this, where they are preparing a big keynote and they know there's a lot resting on it, and they'd like to find a moment of lightness or to make a joke at the beginning, and they don't know if they can get away with it. And a lot of it is to do with risk. And you have to become really expert at risk assessment. And you have to choose your battles. So I think it's very personalised to each situation as to how high a risk that would be to try that joke and let it fall flat on your face. To try a joke or make a comment and for it to bomb can actually be a very high status thing, because you can bounce back from it. And other people in the room are very inspired when that happens. I was telling Matt earlier this week, I was doing a publishing event with 8 authors where I was hosting everybody, getting through it all, interviewing them all, bigging up their books. And the headline act was going to be Bill Bryson, the multi-award-winning, multi-massive, big-selling travel writer. And he hadn't turned up, and he wasn't going to come. He cancelled. He genuinely couldn't physically get there in the end. And they didn't want me to say this until the end of the event. So I had this kind of weighing on me throughout of like, at the end, I've got to manage this energy. And so I was quite sort of stressed and nervous and trying to camouflage that. And then as I came to interview one of the last authors, the notes that I had about her said that she'd written a contemporary debut. So I announced this is a contemporary debut, how exciting, let's speak to the author. And she sat down and I said, congratulations on your first book. And she said, it's not my first book, it's my 3rd book. And how I bounced back from that in that moment. And I immediately was like, I felt terrible for her because I'd insulted her. I felt terrible for me because I looked really stupid. And I felt bad because I knew that after this, there was going to come a moment where I had to say, yeah, also, by the way, guys, Bill Bryson's not here. So in that split second, I had to recover and say, oh, I'm so sorry, but this is a contemporary debut, so your previous books must be historical. Tell us why you moved into contemporary rather than historical. So quickly find something to acknowledge my error, say sorry, move on. And afterwards, everyone in the room, it was the publisher who published this book. So everyone in the room had worked on, everyone who'd worked on the book was in the room, the guy who bought the book was in the room, all of this stuff, all of my colleagues, and they all know that I'm supposed to be the expert on how to own the room and all of this. And they said, oh, we loved watching you screw up. We loved it. And to me, that was a great moment and a great lesson, because it's good to get things wrong. It's good to have a joke fall flat. It's good to say the wrong thing sometimes. I mean, these things are kind of easy for me to say because I'm an outsider. I'm external. I do not work in a company. And you need to also recognise the limits of these things and temper your expectations, because you can't say the same thing in a comedy club that you can say in this environment or at your Q4 marketing report. Right? So you've got to adjust it. So don't, you're not going to go into the meeting and be Joan Rivers. But yeah, take a risk, why not?
Thank you, that was really, thank you.
Why not? A huge thanks to Viv Groskop. Thank you very much for coming.